And that's honestly why I named it Decade, because I was going to try to imply we're going to take decades off your learning curve.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 90 of No Putts Given. I'm Miranda. I've got Harry, Tony, and Chris here with me, as well as special guest Scott Fawcett. Welcome, everybody. How are we doing?
Hey.
Oh, wonderful.
What do you have, Chris?
I got my El Chilito burrito.
You bring this out every episode.
No,
No one
it's been
cares anymore.
It's been like 5 or 6 episodes, and I care deeply.
And we still don't have a chili cheese burrito,
Because
so...
I still don't have a chili cheese burrito.
Oh, my God.
Mark! Anyway.
So welcome to the chaos. We're glad to have you here. For those of you that don't know, Scott founded Decades Golf, which, Scott, why don't you explain what that is? You're going to do a better job than I am.
Oh, maybe. We'll see. Decade is it's an acronym, and honestly, it's kind of funny. I actually did, when I created it, I intentionally was trying to create a word that would become synonymous with course management. So what Decade really is I'm kind of a math nerd, obviously played professional golf way back in the day. And when the strokes gained statistics started coming out back in 2013, I had already been thinking along the lines of golf as more of a poker game, just from having played a lot of poker in the early 2000s. And I just realized that I could take shot pattern statistics from launch monitors and then strokes gain statistics and kind of combine them together like a Reese's peanut butter cup and hopefully solve course management. And I did that. And then the week before the Texas Amateur, I was going to play in it myself. And I got a quarter zone shot in my right arm, which the guy paralyzed my right arm. Conveniently, it came back. Luckily for me, I got a reaction. Yeah.
Good Lord.
He pulled the needle out of my arm and my arm just curled up into a ball. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I can't move my arm." And he goes, "Could you after the shot at all?" I'm like, "Well, you just gave it to me. Is that important?" And about 2 days later, I was cooking and my arm just fell down and it came back to life. It was the craziest thing ever. Yeah.
That I've never heard of such a thing. That's insane.
It sounds like you. Let's face it, you took a Viagra pill, didn't you? It was a Viagra
For the arm?
pill.
It was
just there for 2 days.
I don't think Harry knows how things work.
I wouldn't suggest having it done, but it was one of the spookier feelings of my life when it came back to life. Like I literally was having to peel my arm down and sit on it. Otherwise my arm would just be up here by my elbow or by my shoulder. Anyways.
That's so weird.
Anyways, the guy told me, "Hey, you probably shouldn't play any golf for a little while this year." While he was like, whatever happened in there kind of fixes itself. And Will Zalatoris at the time was just a young junior golfer at my home course. Obviously, I don't have to explain who Will is anymore, but I reached out to him and just told him, I did a bunch of stuff in math for course management. And, at the time he was 3,300 in the world, but the kid, honestly, he probably hit the ball as good or better than he does now as a high school kid. It was really amazing. And I'd always wondered why he didn't do better. And it's actually one of these paradoxical things where he hit it so good that he felt like he could really play far more aggressive than obviously you should. And so I just told him, I can't play next week in the state am, but let me caddy for you. And I promise you'll win. And sure enough, he won by 3. Then luckily the next week he qualified for the US Junior. And luckily it was here in Texas. I would not have gone to New Jersey or wherever. And it was, just a couple hours from my house. So I told my wife at the time that I'll go down there and caddy for this kid. And if he just does what I tell him to do, he's got a great shot at winning it. And he won there. And then, to be honest, he almost won the US Amateur that summer also. Conveniently, SMU's in Dallas, and Jason Enlow, the coach at the time, and I've known each other since junior golf. And he told me, he's like, "Dude, Bryson DeChambeau plays so aggressively. Is there any way you can teach this indoors to him?" Because it had to be indoors, so I wouldn't be considered a third paid coach by the NCAA.
Interesting.
And so he's the next guy that I worked with. And then next thing you know, apparently I'm a strategist. I mean, honestly, it's been kind of comical, but what I really say is that a lot of what I teach so well is because I was so bad at it when I was playing professionally in my 20s. I really do believe I was kind of like a Zalatoris, where I hit the ball really well and struggled with putting. So as a result, you wind up trying to force a lot of stuff with your long game instead of just sitting back and waiting for it to happen. So, I've owned an electricity company here in Texas for 20 years now. And so it really has just been a bit of a side project for a number of years. And over the last, about 2 years, really, I couldn't believe how many people were buying the Decade app and shooting 85 and entering all 85 shots into our GPS database. But we all know how much, when you love golf, you'll do anything to get better. And so then I finally realized I needed to create a product really tailored for them, which is what we did last year with Decade Foundations. And then it's just become this thing where I'm trying to get away from my electricity company as much as possible because it is just more fun, obviously, getting in the golf world. And now with what's gone on in the last 4 months with Zalatoris and Stuart Sink and Garrick Higo and Sam Burns, like it's just been pretty insane. So Decade is a math-based course management system, and there's the history.
So you said it's an acronym, right? What does Decade stand for?
Decade is D is in distance, E is expectation, C is correct target. And I'll admit, I kind of finagled that one a little bit for to make the acronym work.
Still good.
It works. A, analyze, which represents the green side surrounding hazards, the weather conditions, and the course conditions. And then D, discipline, which is what I say all the time is probably the hardest part of Decade. And then E is execute, which is then when we start talking about your pre-shot routine and that part of the game. So
you said it was based on Mark Brody's strokes gained metric, correct? How do they correlate, and how do you use strokes gained? And for any of our readers or listeners who don't know what strokes gained is, we're going to link an article where we explained it just recently. Yeah,
I mean, I can explain that strokes gained literally in 30 seconds anyways. That an 8-foot putt on the PGA Tour is 50-50. So, it's like a coin flip. If you obviously can't hit a putt 1.5 times. So if you make an 8-foot putt, you have moved the ball 1.5 strokes closer to the hole. And 1 stroke, you in essence gain a half a stroke. If you 2-putt it, you move it 1.5 strokes closer to the hole. In 2 strokes, you in essence lose a half a stroke. You then can take it all the way out to every yard in the fairway, 100 yards in the fairway. It takes PGA Tour players an average of 2.8 strokes to hole out. So without getting two numbers to eat, but if you take it from 100 and you hit it to 8 feet, you've moved it from 2.8 strokes to 1.5 strokes. You've moved it 1.3 strokes closer to the hole in 1 stroke. So you in essence gain 0.3 shots. And they've released strokes gained putting really back in like 2010 or 11. It had to be at least 2011 because I wrote a thread on an online poker forum called 2+2 that was just titled, "Is drive for show, putt for dough really true?" And I used some pretty shaky math because we didn't have all of the data at the time, but I was just using the world rankings and money list finishes and FedEx Cup finishes, and then looking at who does the best. And it was just quite obvious that it wasn't the best putters. I just started realizing that I could combine all of these data sets. And Chris Como and I met actually playing in an underground illegal poker game here in Dallas back in 2004. And so I started realizing that I could take all of his TrackMan data from his players, my TrackMan data, and create in essence a generic shot pattern. So just again, the most mathy word I'll use this whole day is standard deviation, which is in a sense just a measure of variance. Could create a generic shot pattern. How big is it? And then overlay the strokes gained putting statistics and basically optimize target selection from there. I did have to kind of guess at what I thought up and down rates were from different areas, which when I went back and double checked everything after they released the entire strokes gained database in 2014, I was within 0.05 shots on all of my guesses. So it really works just perfectly where if you know how many strokes it takes from a certain starting point, and then you have what I like to call is like a shotgun shot pattern. You don't really know where any particular shot is going. You then start to just use a little bit of programming in Excel. It's just basic expectation math. And then you can just find out the optimal target, essentially.
Okay, so can you put it into terms and Harry, you might be able to help with this because you've been using the Decade system. If I am a golfer and I download the Decade app, how does all of that math translate to me? How does it make me a better golfer? And like I said, Harry, chime in on this one because you're using it.
Well, since I just started using Decade, it took all of the emotion out of the game for me. So if I was like, I feel like I need to press here. I need to go after this par 5 and 2 and go out the pin just so I can get myself back on track. And after looking at the percentages of, all right, well, it's going to be like a 15% chance I actually pull this shot off. But if I lay it up into an area where I know my short game is good, or in an area where my numbers are decent for my own game, I'm going to get up and down a good, like maybe 60% of the time. So, what's the higher numbers percentage here? 60 or 15. So I obviously play the percentages a lot more than I would just emotions, which is the biggest thing for me.
That really is exactly what you're talking about. If you would have asked me back in 2015, I would have told you I'm the smartest math guy on the planet. I'm a genius. Yay me. It's all the math. And now 7 years removed, I'm like, oh, it's all emotional control. It really is. Decade is a course management and statistics portal but it's really just a therapist more than anything for all of us. Cause I don't know if you've noticed, but golf tends to attract a lot of type A, obsessive compulsive perfectionist, and golf is the worst sport possible. You couldn't design a worse sport for a perfectionist than golf. No. And so it really just helps remove that emotion. I mean, Zalatoris, after he won the Texas Amateur back in 2014, he sent me a text afterwards that just said, I'll never know how to repay you or thank you. You've given me 25 years of experience in 4 days. And that's honestly why I named it Decade, because I was going to try to imply we're going to take decades off your learning curve. So, to Miranda's question of, what is it? The traditional playing lesson advice, it's really full of holes because golf is the only sport in the world that's not played on a uniform field of competition. If I was playing tennis last night and I said, well, I served it, I rushed the net, my opponent returned it, he stayed back at the baseline, you pretty much know what was going on there. But if I tell you that I was 147 on one, should I aim at the flag or not? You're like, well, I'm going to need to know a little bit more than that. Because again, golf is just played on non-uniform courses. Number 18 at St. Andrews holes only like 360 or 70, and the green is 52 yards wide. Number 10 at Pebble Beach is 500 yards from the US Open tees, and the green is 17 yards wide, and there's an ocean on the right-hand side. Like, middle of the green is completely different advice on those two holes. And that's really where the traditional playing lesson advice talks about, let's go more towards the middle of the green here, or let's get more aggressive in this situation. And it really just doesn't work that way. So with Decade, everything, your target selection starts from working off of the side of the green, the edge of the green that the hole is located closest to. Because really the most important thing in determining the size of your shot pattern, I mean, obviously aside from your skill level, is how long is the shot. The shorter the shot, the smaller the shot pattern. So the closer to the edge of the green that, the AKA, the more aggressive we can get on those shorter shots. And then the next thing you need to consider is, again, is there an ocean on the left, or is it all just fairway run up? And that's, again, the analyze part where you start really tightening in these targets based on the surrounding hazards. And again, that's where, Twitter, you may have noticed, is frustrating sometimes, but my haters on Twitter are just like, well, it can't do this. I'm like, apparently you've never attended the seminar, because it can, and it does. And then the few things that they start talking about, well, all these slopes and ridges are different, and shot patterns are simply huge. All shot patterns are huge relative to any slope on any green. And as a result, if you start trying to take those into account, you're just putting a different part of your shot pattern on the ridge, and you're going to be missing more greens in regulation in order to take that into account. And, I have to go into it, the general idea of most golf courses aren't designed completely ignorantly. And so the slopes aren't 42 feet tall. Like, if there's a 42-foot tall ridge in the middle of the green, I'd probably take that into account. That's not the way courses are designed.
Right.
And so as a result, they're just really, most of the tricks of the trade of architects, they're really just kind of irrelevant, actually, once you understand, the math and satellites of the game.
Tony, MyGolfSpy is very datacratic, so we're, for the most part, liking what we hear Scott saying. Do you think that golf can be whittled down to a game of numbers and simple math?
It's funny, as we continue to evolve our testing methodology of even using robots to a degree, and there's a little bit of conflict in what I'm about to say, but
isn't there usually?
You're right, but like, almost nothing in golf is statistically reliable in terms of like how you lay it out. But man, there are probabilities everywhere. And so when I first saw Decade and kind of looked into it, and again, we'd already been, by the time I saw it for the first time, 10 years into Most Wanted testing. And, since probably the second year, part of what I do kind of behind the scenes is generate elliptical dispersion patterns and, draw circles in Excel. Doing that and then looking at what Scott's done, I'm like, man, this seems almost obvious, and yet like there's this amazing, it's like, hey, look, if I kind of have this pattern and I know what this pattern is, and I just kind of slide it over what is essentially the meaty part of any hole, then that's probably the best approach. And so having kind of seen that and understanding it at that level, like what baffles me is just the pushback that there is on this. Is like, how do you not see this? This is just like it is. It's just math.
Well, I would say the pushback that they get from it is, how do I know my own dispersion patterns without a launch monitor? Well, you could do it if, say, you have an empty range, and you could go through your bag and just say, all right, I'll hit 10 shots here, and I think that that's pretty representative of my shot pattern. Because sometimes, like Scott, you say that every course is like 70 yards wide for the most part on the fairway, which I did my own mapping, and it was just, I was laughing in my own head.
It's spooky, isn't it?
It's so spooky. And in every course, if you're hitting it in around 300, if that is your number, it was like 70 yards wide, if not 65. Yes, there are some holes that they're only like 40 yards wide, and you have to go over obstacles, but you just lay back to a number where you then go for the next probability in. But I think a lot of people would say, how do I know my own dispersion pattern on every single club is probably their only qualm.
The real key to that, and we'll see if I can explain this very well with words. I'm more of a math guy and I'm struggling with COVID brain fog, so we'll see how this goes. But number 4 at Stanford's golf course is a 168-yard par 3. There's a ravine all along the right-hand side, and the front finger of the green is 17 yards wide, and there's a big, deep bunker on the left. And people all the time, specifically amateurs, are like, I need to play more conservatively than a tour player. Like, how can you give me the same advice as them? And that's a perfect example of a hole. Again, there's a lake on the right, there's a bunker on the left. If I make that amateur more conservative with a larger shot pattern, so a tour player's shot pattern is going to be hopefully mostly on the green, and maybe 25 or 30% at that length is going to be in the left-hand bunker. If I make an amateur more conservative just because of their larger shot pattern, they're going to actually hit balls left of the bunker, and for sure a ton of balls in the bunker. And if they hit it left of the bunker, they're typically going to dump that in the bunker and then put that next one into the ravine. And it sounds like a joke, but the math literally does back up. If you're going to hit it in the water, eventually it needs to be as quickly as possible. I mean, it really,
yeah.
You know, and at the end of the day, really, all decisions in life are math-based. And I mean, literally every single one of them, you are weighing some sort of odds in your head, whether you realize it or not. Even something as pedantic as crossing the street, you know, depending on how much of a hurry you're in, if it's not 100%, hopefully you're going to wait a little bit. But if you're, hey, I got to get going, or there's a tiger chasing me, maybe you'll drop that down to 90% or something like that, whether or not a car is going to hit you. But you really are juggling some math in your head, again, whether you realize it or not. And what you're talking about there with the 70-yard wide kind of shot pattern at 300 yards for good players, I just say it all the time. It's like, what's the alternative? Dropping back to 3-wood? Well, now you're making 100% of your second shots longer, 30, 40 yards longer, in order to save maybe 3 to 5% of shots of going into some sort of a hazard or something. And again, I don't want to make it that simple, because it really is a lot of, not math that goes into it, but just following this decision tree. But it is just amazing how formulaic all golf courses, there's a lot of bad golf courses out there, but all good courses really follow this formula pretty closely. I mean, again, aesthetically, they're going to look vastly different, but you're just not going to have a 480-yard par 4 with 50 yards between penalty stroke hazards. And if you guys have listeners in Europe right now, I know they're going, oh yeah, you do. You do get a lot of crazy stuff over there because the courses are older. But what's the alternative? 3-wood is not going to accomplish anything for you.
Well, it could bring in more trouble. Like if I lay back into bringing it into a bunker, fairway bunker, and then there's a probability on hitting out of there and getting on the green. And then if you come back more of a 2-iron, now you're hitting a longer one and its probability is higher.
Yeah, you can't even get home in 2.
It's such a domino effect.
Well, Scott, it seems like the decade golf system works well enough that you were banned from giving seminars by the NCAA to colleges and universities, correct?
I was, yes.
Wow.
How's that feel? What's it like to have a ban by the NCAA?
Well, I got to be honest with you. So again, I own an electricity company, which is definitely back in 2015 was definitely my day job. And I called them originally and they said, as long as you do everything indoors, you're fine. And they would consider me a mental coach. Well, DeChambeau goes and wins the NCAA championship. And during his presser, they're asking him, and he's like, Scott, he's helped save me at least a shot around. And they called me and they're like, DeChambeau referred to you during his press conference saying that you taught him golf. You did everything indoors. I'm like, sure did.
But doesn't everybody have their own sort of personal coaches? Like, don't football players have their strength and conditioning coaches that they go and see at home? Don't basketball players have their free throw shooting coaches?
Yeah, but that's not amateur.
The university can't bring in a third paid coach. And technically, what they're trying to do is not let these NFL offensive coordinators charge $100,000 and come in and give clinics. And so I really was just a scapegoat more than anything else in a non-rev sport where they're like,
okay,
we got to ban somebody. May as well be this jerk. But so after he won the U.S. Amateur, and even Joe Buck said my name on TV, and At that time, I had planned 4 seminars, and I went and gave them at Duke, Clemson, Wake Forest, and then a junior seminar. My seminar's 4 hours long. Like it's a long seminar. And I did that 4 straight days. And I called my wife again then at the time and said, I can't do this. And I'd already booked like 20 other schools for that fall. And so the NCAA called me the next week and they're like, okay, we really need to understand exactly what you're doing because DeChambeau referred to you again. So did Joe Buck. And at that point, I wanted to get banned. I'm like, well, I went and bought a drone and I filmed a whole bunch of golf stuff. And I mean, I guess you could say I'm teaching golf. And I did not expect them when they banned me to literally the opinion the guy wrote in the email. He's like, Scott's seminar is an unfair competitive advantage. I'm like, wow, on the way out the door, you couldn't ask for much more than that.
That's a testimonial if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
How many offers did you get from colleges and universities to come coach their golf team once you were banned as a seminar person?
I actually have gotten a few offers, and I'm like, that is the last thing. I don't do well with multiple people. I would not. I would get myself
large crowds or no go.
Scott doesn't play well with others. He.
I would get canceled in a hurry and fired. I mean, it would not go well.
Yeah. Hey Tony, do you want to give us a call for mailbag?
Mailbag!
That was pretty good.
There we go. Yeah, that was a good
a
one this week. Okay, so this week we got a comment. William Kendall left the perfect question for this week's topic. He said, I love what you guys do. Question, what's the right level of analytics for an average golfer to track? It can get down to minutia, but that is probably too much for the weekend warriors. What should we be looking at, and what should we save our exasperation from dealing with? Let's see, Scott, why don't we start with you?
It's interesting because greens and regulation would have been my answer a couple of years ago. And I was talking with Mark Brody, who is the brilliant man that created the strokes gain statistics from Columbia and the Columbia University, not Columbia, the country. And I said that to him one time when we were having lunch, and he was like, really, but greens and regulation doesn't tell you much because it is the most perfectly correlated to your scoring average. So making up a number, but if you tell me that you average 78, I can tell you average 62% of greens and regulation. And it's funny because perfectly correlated things actually aren't very useful as a statistic to drive anything, because also I always look for actionable advice. Like I can't just tell you go out and hit more greens. That's
well, thanks. I'm going to go play. Thanks for that, Scott.
Yeah, all right.
I hit every green eventually. I mean,
well, at least you don't pick up very often.
Yeah, that's
what we track in the foundations, again, getting back to, I do agree that it can get kind of difficult to track very many statistics. And so we introduced the Tiger 5, which are the 5 things that Tiger tracked back in the late 90s, early 2000s when he was really dominating. And it's how many bogeys did you have on par 5s? How many double bogeys did you have? How many 3 putts? And how many bogeys from inside 150? And then his 5th one was blown easy saves, which for the Decade Foundations app, we've changed to 2 chips. And it's just amazing because Tiger knew somehow intuitively that if he could keep those mistakes to 6 or fewer per tournament, he would win. And the actual number, after Lou Stagner, my main chief data nerd, went back and figured it out, where the actual number for the players finishing 1st to 5th place on the PGA Tour is 6.4 of those per event. And Tiger knew if he could have 6, he'd win. And it's just insane how spot on that was. But really, if you think about it, every round of golf that you finish and you think I should have shot lower, it's typically one of those 5 things. It's not I should have hit it further or hit it closer or made that 20-footer. It's I shouldn't have done one of those 5 dumb things. And it's just amazing how Tiger was out there. Just how many of those dumb things did I did? And critically, the winner averages 1.5 of those around. Back to Harry and I trying to be less of lunatics. If the winner on the PGA Tour is averaging 1.5 of those relatively stupid mistakes, Joe Blow at home, who shot 78, can't finish a round of golf and say, well, I bogeyed that par 5. I should have shot 1 lower. Like, no, That's kind of why you shot 78 or why that is your scoring average. You don't get to just say, I shouldn't have done that, or I won't do that next time.
That's interesting. I like that one. Chris, how about you? What's the right level of analytics for an average golfer to track?
Yeah, good question. I think a lot of it goes back to their own appetite for tracking certain things, right? Like there's some people that, that's really a cumbersome thing for them to track anything more than their score on each hole. And there's some people that are, much more quantitative and they want to, they would track everything they possibly could. They get in the car on the way home and they're already jotting down stuff, et cetera. So I think there's a couple facets in here. One of it is kind of your own personal capacity to do that, because if it's not within some of your nature, you're going to be constantly probably frustrated with doing a lot of those things. Secondly, I think, for the average golfer, I think it's, start simple and then build it up a little bit as you go. So even if it is something like a perfectly correlated item like a greens in regulation, start tracking that. At least you're tracking something, and then maybe you want to build from there. But the point being that we're not tracking birdies, 300-yard drives, and wedge shots to inside 10 feet, right? It's much more about tracking the things that we know detract from a score, as opposed to trying to force good things to happen that ultimately you can't really control. And this gets into a kind of other rabbit holes that we could go into around what are some of the really key, super interesting facets or kind of tenets and beliefs of Decade that kind of fly in the face of some conventional, I'm not even going to call it wisdom because it's not, but some conventional thinking that just gets passed down over and over because I guess it sounds good and people have questioned it. Those are typically the two reasons that bad information gets passed along is it passes somewhat of a smell test and nobody stops to challenge it. And Decade is full of those little nuggets. So I'll leave that as a teaser.
All right. Tony, we have, of course, tested and reviewed different shot tracking apps like Arccos and ShotScope and similar things. And we say that golfers can get better using them. Do you think that is a good level of expertise for average golfers to have to improve their game using things like that?
So, yeah, let me first say I do love Arccos. I'm a longtime user. I know I've seen some of Scott's tweets, not his favorite for sure.
No, it's not true. I just think there's a few logical mistakes they make.
And
my main thing is you have to tidy up the data afterwards. I have no problem with Arccos.
Yeah, and what I would say, and I agree with that point, right? It's like there is a frustration level. It's only useful if you're willing to manage it every step of the way to a degree. And likewise, I would say like it's really good in telling you sort of identifying weaknesses in your game. It tells you how far you hit everything. But I think kind of the crucial piece that's missing versus what Scott does is Arccos doesn't effectively tell you where to aim. And that's when you think about it in terms of playing golf.
That's kind of a big part of golf, right?
That's a
yeah, isn't that the whole point?
If you're really trying to sort of optimize your strategy and hit smart shots as much as you are trying to hit good shots, that's kind of a key piece that's missing. So, as much as I like it, I love what Scott said. The only thing, when you say, hey, make fewer bogeys, keep track of where you're making doubles, for example, like, obviously, yeah, I want to make fewer bogeys, but I still, I need to identify the why there. And so I think maybe I need to kind of go on to the next step, right? Like for a lot of golfers, I think maybe the foundation stuff's probably, again, like Chris said, it depends on the guy. Foundation's probably awesome for a good percentage. It's sort of like, all right, where do you want to go for the next step?
Well, exactly what Chris was saying earlier, where you start with tracking something, some greens, some putts, just start by tracking something, which is why with the foundations, month 1 and 2, I think it is, we just track those Tiger 5. I just want to build the habit. It takes like 3 minutes. Then we add in strokes gained putting. Then we add in penalty shots. And then we add in the mental scorecard. So we've gone from no stats to 3 minutes to 5 minutes to 7 minutes. Then when you jump to elite, it takes about 15 minutes to enter a round of golf. I mean, it is what it is. If you want good analytics,
right,
it's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, there's not much you can do about it. The main key to me with any sort of stats is when somebody says, I had a professional player just yesterday asked me to look at their stats. I'm like, okay, cool. And they're at 53% of the fairways. And he had said, I need to hit more fairways. I'm like, well, how far do you hit it? 53% might be great. Look at Dustin Johnson. If you're Zach Johnson, that's probably not very good. So you really have to look at combinations of categories, which again is what strokes gain does so well. So somebody on Twitter one time, I had talked about, no one stat tells you anything in isolation very well. And the guy replied with, well, strokes gained approach is amazing. I'm like, that's not one stat. That's a bunch of stats boiled down into one data point. But that is not one statistic. And just to touch up what you're talking about, Arccos there, I really don't have any issue with Arccos. I think it's pretty impressive actually how they track it with that. But I don't like what you had said actually was how far each club goes. In my opinion, you need to know how far every club goes when you just hit it full on a range. And then you need to know how to take that information, because I've hit 57 irons in the last 20 rounds. guess that'd be about right. And they averaged 174. Well, I flighted some, I hit some into the wind, I hit some downwind. Like, I do think that information, when you actually look deeply into it, it's probably close to accurate.
I mean, that's the question that I had when I was at one of the seminars with Chris, actually, at the PGA show is, hey, when I'm saying over here, it's all pretty much target golf for the most part in America, if you think about it. When you go over to Europe, it's more of hitting knockdown shots and doing all, unless you're on the coast at like California where a wind blows for fun. It's always knocking shots down. You're trying to flight shots. You're trying to do all this. And when I asked that question, does it take into account? He says, yes, it takes it into account, but it can't. Where I would love to see it is it's tracking ball speeds and your club head speed. And then once you get all that numbers, you can get a really good, accurate representation of, all right, my 7-iron goes this far at this ball speed. When I knock it down, it goes this far. But you just, like Scott said, everything kind of goes in, unless you top one and then it eliminates it because it's out your variables, which happens from time to time. It just happens.
Critically, people think, well, it'll just average out. That is not true. It does not just average out, because into the wind, it impacts it. A TrackMan study that a guy did one time, 184 yard 6-iron, with just calm and no wind. That same shot into a 20 mile an hour wind only carries 143, so 41 yards shorter. And 20 miles an hour downwind, it carries 207, which is only 23 yards more. So into the wind and downwind, it doesn't cancel each other out.
No, it's almost twice as impactful, right? Yeah.
Well, but the other thing too is because nobody, tour players included, nobody hits the ball as far as they think they do.
Yes, they don't.
The problem with using the averages is the end of the wind average impacts it more. So it really winds up, it makes the problem even worse.
And the average golfer doesn't want that kind of maintenance, right? If you talk about what's the perfect scenario, well, there's a button to say, hey, headwind, tailwind, and how much, and another button for whether it was a full swing or a knockdown, or I was behind a tree, so I had to hook the 5-iron and keep it low. There's just not that level of details. Yeah.
Yeah, and here we just keep on adding to the amount of time it takes, and that's where it's funny because people are like, I want the stats to take less than 10 minutes to enter. I'm like, I wouldn't track any stats because it's just not going to be that quick.
Harry, I want to give you a chance to chime in on this question. We'd call you probably an above average golfer, right? And you track your game really closely. Do you think the extent to which you track your game is distracting to average golfers that just want to play better with their buddies on the weekends?
I mean, it all depends on what your end goal is. If you want to get better, track stats. It just is what it is. You have to put the time in. If you just want to go and drink beer and have shit talking with your buddies, then don't even worry about it. Just shit talk to your friends. But for me, I rather track stats, and I was tracking stats like how many greens do I hit in regulation, like distance, fairways. But after actually looking at Decade, it made me think a little bit differently, purely because the longer is better, even if you're in the rough, unless it's up to your face in rough, You're not going to find it or whatever. Longer is better. I'm only a short guy, dude. So come on.
What are you? 4 foot
It's
one?
probably up to your knees. It's probably up to your knees. But longer is better off the tee. But when it comes to stats related, I do look at unforced errors, and I'm thinking, why did I do that? And does it happen sometimes in the same scenario? Do I need to hit a different shot? So for me, I'm at a different level of tracking stats. I track stats in a different way than I did when I first started.
I think that just simply understanding that post-analysis is important is a huge step in the right direction. I mean, again, I play a smart guy on the internet, but I look back at myself in my 20s. I'm like, my God, what a moron. I mean, I kept on making the same mistake day after day after day with zero effort of how to stop feeling like you've wasted shots each round. And I do think that it's just hilarious looking back at it. Because again, I won 10 times on the Hooters tour and every single tour, except for the ones you actually want to win on when I was younger. So I was good, but I never came close to making it. And now that I'm 48 and I don't play any golf at all, I'm almost as good from a handicap standpoint. I'm a +5 and I was a +6 back then. I literally am not a member of the country club. I do not play golf, and I'm only a shot worse than I was when I was a full-time playing professional in my 20s. Like, that makes zero sense.
Or it makes a lot of sense.
Well, It's just how much better I think. I mean, again, I played in Q school 2 years ago, kind of as a joke, because I wanted to just play some rounds of golf. I flushed 5,400 down the toilet just as an experiment for fun. And I was 11 under for the 7 rounds that I played. And I'm just like, I'm actually competing with these young kids because it's a total tortoise in the hare situation here. And it was just hilarious to watch and just listen to it. But again, back to caddying for Zalatoris, there were so many times that I would be listening to our competition and I'd be like, that's a dumb idea. That's
you have no chance.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And it was one of the matches in the US Junior. And I'm just like, dude, look at him. He's starting to freak out. He's going to try to force something along the way. Just stick to our plans. Trust me, this is going to work out. And it was on number 12, this par 3. He hit it in a bunker and he proceeded to just dismantle the bunker. And Will was it was honestly like I had a crystal ball that entire summer because I could just see what was going to be coming from these junior golfers based on how they were acting and thinking. And I can say that because I was 1,000-fold worse when I was that age. And it's back to what Harry's talking about, just removing emotion. That is everything. I've got an announcer one time that's on TV that was saying, I played better with emotion. I'm like, no, you played worse without emotion. You can't play better than you are. You just didn't perform.
That's
carry the
one of the interesting things that when I'm watching golf now, when I'm watching golf, I hear the commentators say, oh, he's going to be aggressive here. And then after listening to your video, Scott, you could just think that they don't really know what he's trying to do here. Like, it was Tiger Woods at this time. And you said, Tiger Woods is playing to his spot every single time. And if he pulls it onto the pin, then so be it. It just is what it is because he's shot pattern. But he was saying he's going to be aggressive here. And hearing the commentators change their tune based on what your theory is, Scott, is actually really impressive. And it's great that you're manipulating people from behind the scenes.
I used to give him a pretty hard time. I actually feel bad. Look, I was in a really bad dark spot in my life back in 2015, 16, and 17. So I definitely gave people a harder time than I probably should. I didn't really care at the time. Filling 4 hours of dead air has to be really hard, but you really have to consider.
Coming from a broadcaster, yes.
It's got to be impossible. And so I cut them a lot more slack than I used to. But at the end of the day, you don't know what the intention was on any given shot. And, Cameron Champ has won now 3 times on the PGA Tour. He actually attended my seminar twice in college because I was the volunteer assistant at Texas A&M, since that's where I went while he was in school there. And when he won his first event in Jackson, his target, you could hear his caddy, Kurt Kwolek, doing a great job of just playing him like a video game on 13, par 3, 147. He said, are you committed to a target 4 yards left of this pin? And then he hits it. He stuffs it to like 9 feet. Announcers are going off. What a great shot. Amazing. You just fire it right at the pin. I'm like, you literally could hear the caddy saying 4 yards left. But then 3 holes later on 16, the pin is on the left side. There's a lake over there left. The pin was 4 or 5 yards from the left edge. Caddy again does the math, says 5 yards right of this pin. And Cameron again hits it 5 yards right of that target, which on 13 was really convenient because that's where the hole was. This time it's not convenient because now he's hit it to 30 feet. And the announcer said, you see, that's just a little too conservative there. I'm like, it's the exact same shot as the one he just hit on 13. It's just unfortunate it wasn't on the hole side of his target. And that's ultimately like what somebody said earlier, talking about Tiger saying, he was asked on the air back in 2014 at the Hero. They said, Tigers, you've gotten older. Do you play more aggressively or more conservatively? And Tiger's answer was, I've always played aggressively 100%. And at the time I'd already done a lot of work for him and Como with reverse analyzing Tiger's strategy. I looked at 20,000 of his shots by hand, and you would not classify his strategy as aggressive. And when he said that, I was like, wrong. But then he finished the sentence and he said, well, I'm very aggressive, but I'm aggressive to my spots. And so wherever I would put my spot, which might be a little bit more on the conservative side, but I'm playing more aggressively to that. And I'm like, oh my God, he's so good at this. He doesn't even understand the question. The question wasn't, are you playing aggressively to your spot? The question was, are you playing aggressively, which means, are you firing at pins? Like he's literally on such a different plane. He doesn't even understand the most basic question, because I'm sure he's like, you mean people are dumb enough to just go out and fire at every single pin? Like,
yeah, to him, that's what makes sense, right? And I think that's I think you've even used the phrase, and correct me if I'm wrong, but snake oil. And we tend to have a negative connotation with that, right? Where it's like, selling people something that's just, might as well be a bag of dicks, right, Tony? Like, oh, look, here it is. And I got that instead of what I was hoping for. But the concept, like if you had to boil down decade into the most simple, basic terms possible, people would look at it and go, well, no shit. Yeah, okay. Why wouldn't, I mean, kind of like what Tiger has learned over time, or you talk to anybody who's gotten to that level in their field or whatever, and it's clear they do things differently than others, but to them, it is so blatantly obvious that that's the way to do something correctly. They don't even consider, right, the other options or realm of possibilities, or, why would I possibly hit it there when I know that my best percentage chance for making a par or whatever is over here? And they have this macro perspective, right? Whereas, back to Harry's on the weekend golfer that wants to get better. I'm convinced most weekend golfers don't actually want to get better at golf. They say they do, but they don't actually want, like, they like the theory. Like, I love the theory of losing weight, but, like, am I really committed to it? Like, I love the theory of it, but I'm not going to count calories and bullshit like that. Like, no. So, point being, they don't really actually want to improve. If you did, you would look at that and say, okay, what's my macro perspective? Most golfers are micro perspective. It's this shot, it's that target. If I didn't hit it exactly there, it's, it's either good or bad, failure or success. And Decade asks you to have a more macro perspective on, and that's really what strokes gained are, because all these little segments, right, add up over time. And it's not making one better decision, it's making that better decision 100 times in a row.
I mean, I think one of the key points that kind of came up to my mind as you were talking there is what Tiger says, I play aggressively to my spots. I do think the vast majority of veteran, experienced, good players, they could probably go, if they went out and you just said, where should you aim this shot? Most of them would probably pick pretty good targets. They've played enough golf that they could do that. But the key is every PGA Tour player that I work with that you've never heard of, when we get to this spot in my seminar, and I say, we got to play aggressive to our spots. I remember back when I was in my 20s playing, I would pick a good spot left of the pin, and then I would hope I push it by the pin. And they all sit back and laugh when I say that. And they're like, oh, I do that 7 times around. And it probably sounds asinine to amateurs saying, you mean they pick a spot and then they don't try to hit it there? Like, it's so obviously stupid. It's mind boggling. And this is what a guy like Colin Morikawa, which again, Colin attended my seminar in college at Cal, but his instructor, Rick Sessinghaus, had basically been teaching him. And again, I know I haven't, great instructors have been teaching what I teach a long time. Now I have quantified and systematized it, but Rick Sessinghaus has been teaching Colin essentially this since he was a kid, which is where it just makes sense to Colin to go out, pick good targets, play aggressively to those spots, let variance come your way, and hit the same shot over and over and over again. And, your question of if you were going to boil down Decade into a nutshell, I shouldn't do it because I'm hoping to sell a few apps out of this, but super aggressive off the tee, moderately conservative into the green, get really good at lag putting. One of my favorite comments I get from people is, well, don't you have to be good at lag putting to be good at this? I'm like, no, you have to be good at lag putting, be good at golf. So no, yes, but lag putting is just not that hard once you understand how to practice lag putting with speed drills instead of just randomly rolling balls all around. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to just being aggressive to your spots. That is just what most people don't do. And that's really the reason I entered Q School 2 years ago, is because I played in the Texas Am and the US Mid Am that summer. And yes, they've got decently hard pins, but they're not like a PGA Tour pin where every pin is 3 or 4 yards from the edge of the green. I wanted to play a tournament where they were all just going to be stuffed on the corners, and I would see how hard it is to hit a 6-iron at the middle of the green and not sit there and kind of hope it leaks over to the right or to the left. Because the key to all of this is we're trying to get your range game onto the golf course as efficiently and effectively as possible. And you have never once hit a 6-iron on a driving range and thought, I hope I'm hit this 7 yards right of my target. Not once has anyone done that. And then we do that 7 to 10 times around on the course. So you're putting this wishy-washy, non-committed swing on it, hole after hole. And that is, in my opinion, where all outlier shots come from.
He's stinging me here.
Kind of not really sure what you're trying to do with it. I'm just kind of hitting it that way and hoping.
Ish. Yeah, they're ish shots where it's like, I'm aiming over here.
I mean, right at the center of that tree, ish.
All right, I think that's actually a really good place for us to wrap it up today, guys. Any final thoughts or questions for Scott before we head out?
Yeah, I got a couple. 2.
Okay, all right.
I have 17.
So
This is a 2-part series.
So first question, what is the worst shot you've seen on the PGA Tour this year in terms of just pure decision making?
Ooh.
Well, the first
He doesn't
problem
watch golf. Scott
I know
doesn't watch
intent.
golf.
You don't know intent. I know you don't know
Neither do
intent.
you, Tony.
But you could speculate.
I will say I did send Rick Sessinghouse a text when Colin tried to draw that shot on about number 5 or 6 in the final round of the British Open. He clearly was trying to draw an iron shot and he left it out to the right. I sent Rick a text just like, why do you think Colin would try to draw that shot? I didn't get a response, which makes me think he was thinking, I have no idea, man. And then I even got a text from Sean Martin, the PGA Tour writer over at the Olympics, and he said, man, I just saw Colin try to draw another shot on a par 3 and he blew it straight right there too. So, I mean, honestly, nothing comes to mind simply because I don't watch much golf. Oops.
All right. Fair enough.
First question was a dud. Now this isn't a 2-part.
Second question, angles?
Angles, schmangles.
Chase them.
Well, and again, Mark Brody is light years smarter than me. I will say that, and I say this all the time, anytime that we disagree on anything mathematically, he's right in the math. I'm choosing a different interpretation of it because of my ability as a player. And he was on No Laying Up's podcast the other day, and luckily I don't listen to anything they do, but
or no putts given for that matter.
well, that's true too.
Yeah, that's where we are.
But Solly was just trying to lead him on so many questions, trying to get him to basically disagree and make the stuff that I talk about wrong. And he brought up angles. And Mark was like, no, and he even mentioned, he's like, Scott Fawcett and Lou Stagner have done a great job with this angle stuff. And then he just kept going with, well, what if there's nothing right and there's just rough and the greens are firm? And so you've got a better angle. And well, Mark's like, oh, well, if yes, then yes, you can hunt an angle. And I just I wish there was like a call-in button because I'm going to be like, just show me that hole. Show me the hole where there is 70 yards of nothing to the right. And then there's this better avenue into the green. There's always going to eventually be a tree, a bunker, a lake, a house. There's going to be something over there. And really what you have to think of when you're thinking about angles, and we'll see how this one goes, think of a Venn diagram where you've got these 2 overlapping circles. If you're trying to hunt an angle up the right, so you're aiming a little bit more to the right, the center of your shot pattern now is gaining that angle. The right side of your shot pattern is going to be the one that's going to eventually be in somebody's house or trouble. If I'm aiming at the middle of the fairway, the right side of my shot pattern is going to have that angle, period. And so those overlapping parts of the circle where you're intending to hit it are overlapping with the right side of your shot pattern when aiming at the middle. And I'm not saying you should or shouldn't aim at the middle, but the only reason you need to not be aiming at the middle for the most part is because of a penalty stroke hazard. You have to find your golf ball. And so you really have to just understand and trust that, especially off the tee, shot patterns are 70 yards wide if you hit it over 270 or 280. That's how big they are in play. And so you really have to just trust the variance within your shot pattern. We'll see how this one goes. Variance or randomness. I was on another podcast last week that Myron Scholes, who is a Nobel Prize winning economist, happened to be listening to, and he challenged my word. He sent me an email challenging my use of the word variance. I'm like, okay, you've got a Nobel Prize. I'm going to assume you're correct.
It sounds like you work for MyGolfSpy because we get all of these all the time. Well, you didn't mean, what does this mean?
Yeah, and now I'm literally feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I'm going to assume you guys don't have Nobel Prize winners in your audience.
There's
Not
hoping.
yet.
The variance within your shot pattern is what is going to create those angles. I understand that certain angles can be better than other ones. It's just that you can't chase them profitably. And that is just literally in any situation. And again, the No Laying Up guys were giving me a hard time a couple of years ago. Like, there's definitely spots where it's better to be 180 than 100. I'm like, go put the pin anywhere you want and put my ball anywhere you want at 100 and go get Zach Blair and put him anywhere you want at 180. And you just figure out how much money you can bring. And I will take every single bet you can field.
Yeah.
And shockingly, they didn't take that bet because Zach was probably like, guys, that's a bad idea.
It reminds me of the TLC song, right? Don't go chasing waterfalls. Waterfalls are like angles. Stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. That's what will work.
Oh my God.
Once every show.
Yeah.
They're so good.
Do we have to get a TLC reference in every show or what?
No,
Just
it's
some
just
random
sort of
analogy.
or metaphor that always makes so much sense.
It just
but
works.
I would have never thought of it myself.
Most people don't. All right. What are the top 2 or 3 besides, chasing angles? And I was texting with Lou earlier this week. 'Cause there's a gentleman that was thinking that we should walk the course backwards, gain the nuance and insight on how to play it from the green back to the tee. And I claimed that was just, walking a course backwards is backwards thinking. What are the 1 or 2 things that you think most golfers would commonly hear that are the most destructive pieces of advice that have gotten passed down?
Probably laying up to your numbers, a really bad one. Closer is always better. Again, within reason. I hate making definitive statements because there's always a I gotcha. And it's funny the lengths people will go to find a gotcha on any definitive statement I make. So this is with a grain of salt, laying up to your number 15 at Innisbrook from a couple years ago. It's a 195-yard par 3. Wind was about 10 miles an hour off the left. So every single shot's hit off of a flat piece of ground off of a tee. And the shot pattern was 50 yards wide and 50 yards deep. So let's pretend you're 300 yards. You like it at 100 yards instead of 60. Well, if you try to lay up to 100, you don't get to just place it at 100 because that was your intention. Based on the tour's shot pattern depth on a par 3 of 50 yards, that means you're going to lay it up somewhere between 75 and 125 probably. Shocker, you're not going to get the number you want anyways. And the real key to all of this is if you go back to Zalatoris, number 3 in the final round of the Masters, he ships driver up there about 35 yards short of the green. And I'll agree, he did not hit a very good pitch shot. He got, I've talked about it after. He's like, yeah, it's kind of a tight lie. You definitely don't want it coming back to your feet. I just kind of goosed it a little bit, had about 25 feet coming back down the hill. It was a bad shot from 35 yards. Go back to 90 yards where the next group was Justin Rose and Hideki, and they both airmailed the green. A bad shot from 35 yards is typically better than a good shot from 90 yards. And so it's this hurdle you've got to get over of, I just don't like that shot, or I didn't hit a good one. And again, you have to think of the entire range of outcomes. This is why golf really is just a giant poker game. I know what card you want the dealer to turn over on the turn, but there's so much of a range of potential outcomes. You just have to understand that getting it closer is going to be better long-term. I really don't care who you are unless you've got like the chipping yips. I mean, and even still, it's just
get your power out.
well, but again, critically is a lot of times like with angles or like with a shot like this, where people are trying to find a situation where they're trying to apply like game theory, which is, it's not advanced math, but it's just a bit of logic. And there are times where maybe overriding decade would be correct. But if you're out there spending your entire day looking for these little spots, we're going to make 5 mistakes for every one time you get it right for a net loss. And as Stuart Sink said, I mean, he bought the Decade app out of the App Store the week before he won last year in Napa. And then after he won in Hilton Head early this year, a few months ago, they had him on PGA Tour radio the day after I was on, and they were asking him about Decade. And he was like, it just takes so much off my mind. It basically makes the decisions for us. It makes me, I'm fresh. It keeps me energized. I'm not thinking all day long. Again, it's the most cliche, sports psychology thing ever, but presence is what wins. You just have to remain present and out of all of these mental gymnastics, because ultimately it is just exhausting to be running these calculations in your head all day long, especially since half the time you don't even know what the hell you're doing anyways. You're just making stuff up.
Right. And again, it's a macro thing, because you might be right on that one. I may lay up to 82 yards and stuff it to 4 feet and make the putt, and Decade's wrong. And it's like, no, if we put you in that scenario, right, 100 times at 40 yards and 100 times at 80 yards, which one's going to win out over time, right? And I think people get so fixated on the one example that may or may not jive with the rest of the thinking that they somehow use that as the holy grail of,
Well, it comes down to how far do you hit a driver? Oh, I hit one that rolled downwind, downhill, and it went 300 yards. Well, now that's my new driver distance. I hit it 300 yards, but actually on average, you hit it 260. It's the kind of same analogy.
Well, if you put me 60 yards in the fairway, I will play anyone on this planet literally for any amount of money they can scrape together, because I've got this shot where I use a putter grip. I can take this thing back as far as I can without letting my hands feel like they set, and it literally goes 60 yards every single time. It's spooky. I did it on George Bryan's YouTube channel one time. He's like, got any tips for a shot from 60? I'm like, that's actually really funny. And I hit it to a foot. It's spooky. But if I'm trying to lay up to 60, I'm probably going to lay up to somewhere between, I don't know, 45 to
75, probably.
Yeah. So that's now a range that I'm not going to do as good from 50 to 90 yards or 50 to 80 yards, whatever the actual math is, as I would from 20 to 50. So getting it up there closer, I'm never going to have my money shot, but I'm going to do a lot better from that range of outcomes versus the range of outcomes that includes the 60-yard shot.
I love it.
All right. I think this has been very informative. All of our readers are super engaged.
Miranda's going to try to shut us down. Tony has 4 more questions he'd like to ask.
Remind us quickly before we go, we can get the Decade Golf app on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. Am I correct?
Yep. Wherever you buy apps, obviously you can do that. You can go to birdiefire.com or playinglesson.com. I mean, at this point, luckily for me, if you just stick Decade in anywhere, you're going to pretty much find us and figure it out. So
okay.
It's been a lot of fun, honestly. It really has. I know I catch a lot of grief on Twitter, but apparently changing how people see things, long held beliefs is really hard. So I like to think I'm not the asshole that I play on Twitter.
That's probably most people.
Well, that may be the best barometer. It's like if you go online and you can't find Decade, you're probably not smart enough to use it. You know?
And on that note, we out.
That's it.
Scott, thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. This is great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let me tell you one most surprising ball in the test for me and Tony, I guarantee for Tony too, was the Titleist tour speed. We were like, why is this going straight and long and consistent? Just obviously looking at it from hitting ball after ball from the tour speed, we were like, holy crap, this is really, really good.